This is Johnny Tremain, chapter 6, 7. And first we'll go over to our characterization. Johnny is becoming a loyal friend to Rab. And now he's starting to have some interaction with the British. He has been around Rab and started to read and decide that he is with the revolution and the revolution ideas, but has also grasped the ability to see the British as people and even likes, some of them and sees that, all people have some good in them. He is able to make money by running errands basically for the British, which also allows him to be a spy. And he at one point said, well, I can't fight because of my crippled hand, so I guess my worthy cause is being bored to tears for the cause of the revolution, meaning wasn't very exciting, delivering letters and things like that. But he was faithful, and the money he got, he took back to basically his new family now and gave it all to them. It's not just thinking for himself of himself anymore, but of everybody. And that has brought into his life wonderful relationships. And on the same token, Johnny is still not perfect. He was given a bunch of lip to Rab about how the troops look terrible and things like that. And Rab just let him talk because Johnny, quite frankly, was envious. Wished he could be one of them. And so, he still struggles with some of that, kind of mixed feelings and things like that. The other thing that was kind of interesting is all of the sudden Scylla decided maybe she might move on to other things and maybe even to other boys like Rab. And Johnny suddenly realized that relationship was important to him, and that if he wanted to keep that relationship, he was going to have to be faithful and put some work into it. So he's learning some of those manhood. We've talked before about foils, and foil characters are to compare and contrast, usually with the protagonist. And let's go over some of those now. So we've got Rab is basically throughout the book an ideal young man. And we see that he is just, not prone to anger, but at the same time, if you're going to mess with the little twins and stuff, he will have what we may call righteous anger. He's not a pacifist either. And we'll talk a little bit about, maybe you could think and compare him to Mr. Lapham, who is a pacifist, and then Rab, who is a righteous kind of revolution, fighting for good things. Okay? We have Scylla, and she is an interesting, she is just very focused on people and her friendships. At the beginning of the book, it was Izana, and she lived and died to take care of Izana, and now she's a servant of Lavinia, and she's, kind of loyal, so she's very other-focused, which is, a good thing, but all humans, and particularly some of the ones Scylla is serving, have their faults, and she doesn't seem to basically be serving righteous ideals and different things like that as much as just specific people, whether it's for good things or bad things. So that's kind of an interesting foil there. Then we have Dove, and Dove, remember at the tea party, he's like, oh, I'm going to steal some tea so I can sell it, or different things. He is just always trying to make sure he has food, shelter, and clothing, and he just wants to try to do whatever it takes to survive, quite frankly. And nobody respects him because he doesn't see past the end of his nose. But we can't be too hard on him because nobody else was looking out for Dove. And it's easy in those circumstances when there isn't anybody else looking out for you to feel like that your soul, what you should do is look out for yourself. And so that's how Dove went, instead of entrusting himself to God and continuing even in those circumstances to, think about what he should be doing is right. Then you have Lavinia. And it's real interesting because, she's externally beautiful, but internally ugly. And we even see Johnny a little bit infatuated with her, and going, she is just so beautiful, but at the same time, able to see through that outer shell to the ugliness, and, is not impressed. Anyway, so then we have Izana, who becomes kind of maybe her little puppet, I guess is the best word for that. And Izana it's just sickening. All she does is live for the attention of others. And especially once she gets into kind of the Light family, it just gets worse. Okay. So, a couple of literary things that are in this book. There's the symbolism of the birth and death room, and it's mentioned a couple times in the book, where Johnny, when he burnt his hand, he was put in that room. Now, that is an actual room, kind of back in these type of houses back in, revolutionary periods, that they would have one tiny little bedroom on the first floor for a mom and new baby, or for somebody who was very, very sick, to be close to the kitchen, close to care, that sort of thing, not up in a loft, in a ladder. But in our story, it's not just the birth and death room. It symbolizes that we had the death of the boy Johnny, the haughty, proud, trying to get out on top for himself, and the birth of Johnny, the new man, living for other things. Okay. We also have a motif, and a motif may be a new word for you. Basically, think of a symbol repeated throughout the story. Okay. And so the motif, one of the motifs in this one, is this rising eye that's the symbol of the Light family. And throughout the story, it appears, first it's sort of maybe it's the sun shining, the glimmer of hope for Johnny, and then it's, just, it's on everything, everywhere we go, there's this rising eye, and people worshiping. Well, now there was a quote that says, the people of Milton had had enough of that rising eye. And so the rising eye is kind of a symbol of the way that the Light family lived, just looking down on others and haughty and trying to get everybody to look at them. And the people had enough of that. And so something was... Okay. Let's see. So themes. So basically, at the beginning of this section, you have that there was the Boston Tea Party, and then the way that they isolated Boston seemed way unjust and harsh, too much of a punishment for dumping all the tea. And so then the colonies are uniting and working together against a common enemy of Britain. And so unjust, harsh stuff like that will unite and empower victims and things like that. So kind of interesting there. Next thing is words do matter. They said correctly in the book that the newspaper men that were, publishing things and would be the first to hang. So part of a war is your words. Okay. Another theme is that when you're in the middle of a situation, it's hard to have a correct view of it. But then when you go back and look at it from a different time, it all just takes on a new light and helps you to see some perspective there. And so Johnny, now that he's not in the middle of living with the Laphams and trying to make enough silver to, live well and things like that, he's able to empathize even with Dove, Mr. Tweedy, Miss Lapham. Oh my goodness, before she was just this, I love to get up and make people work. And I was like, she was trying to provide for everybody and stuff. So, when the going gets rough, you can sort of feel like everybody is against you, and then when you get it in perspective, you can empathize and realize we're all just trying to kind of make the best of a situation. There was a quote about Izana that says, "No one can make a monkey out of someone who isn't a monkey to start with," and basically saying that Izana had no character. She had no kind of identity. She was just living for, being in the spotlight. And so she was able to be taken advantage of by the Light family, by the soldiers, and be turned into a show. And it was disgusting, but that can't happen to you unless you start out with that moldability and letting others control you in that way, whether it's for attention or for maybe like Dove to just try to, get enough food and clothing and shelter. You need to stand for something or you'll fall for anything, is another quote that would kind of go along with that. So know who you are and stand for it. Okay, this I think we haven't actually read here. I'm kind of ahead of myself, but once again, this kind of goes back to the birth and death room sort of thing. But eventually, Johnny is going to move on from ever wanting to identify with the Light family, and because he has seen their character. The externals don't mean as much to him. Something to talk about is when they were having the meeting, and there was basically a little mob that attacked one of the Tory guys. And it made Johnny sick at his stomach, as it should have. Talk to your parents about basically something called mob behavior and violence, and how that when a big group of people angry about something or excited about something gets together, that sometimes it can result in violence, and that can totally ruin a good cause, that you really need to keep your head, especially in a crowd. Talk to people about that. Also, little petty sins do have a big consequences. Okay, so don't just, oh, no big deal if I take a little tea bag or whatever. No, that can undermine the whole revolution, because then you have turned in something that was a righteous cause, you're doing it in an unrighteous way, and you give the enemy a cause to say, well, they're just bad guys. Okay. Lastly, for our thinking activity, Mr. Lapham at the beginning of our story here. So he was a humble, God-fearing Tory. Which means he was, wanted to remain loyal to the British. Okay, he was a pacifist. How do I define that for you? Not a real actor. He wants to trust God and live a quiet life. Okay, all right. And then you have other guys who are in the story who are hopefully humble, God-fearing revolution leaders. Okay, so I want you to contrast that there. And when should we respect and obey our government authorities like Mr. Lapham? And when should we start a revolution? Is it ever okay for a humble, God-fearing person who wants to live a quiet, godly life to start a revolution? When? Why? How? And remember, we don't want mob violence. We don't, and so maybe write down some responses to that. And that's all.